Thank you all for joining us today for the ANA eLearning Academy. We are very excited at this new opportunity to come together when we are all so far apart. I would like to give a special thank you to our presenter, Gamal, who has put in many hours to make this happen in such a short time. As you've seen, we have added many new e-learning opportunities to our website. If you have not checked out our website in the last few weeks, I recommend jumping to see the other new presentations we have added. I will share the link to this site at the end of the presentation. During this presentation, you may come up with questions. If you do, please put them in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will read them to Gamal at the end of the presentation. If I do not get to any of your questions, I will email them to Gamal and then email you his response as well. We're very excited to hear about the numismatic journey through Egyptian Islamic history, and I will go ahead and let Gamal get started on that.
Again, my name is Gamal Amer. I am a collector of all things numismatics, and this talk is based on one of my collections, Islamic coins from Egypt, basically. So basically, I look at my collection and I came up with basically a story about what happened to Egypt post the Byzantine rule and the role Islam played in modern Egypt, basically. And so to start this, I want to show you what the Byzantine Empire at its height looked like. Basically, the entire Mediterranean Sea basin was part of the Byzantine Empire, including Egypt. Egypt, where the arrow is pointing. And you had the capital or the seat of the Byzantine was in Constantinople. At the time, Egypt used Byzantine coins. These gold coins were and just to make things clear, my collection is based on gold coins, so I'm more interested in the gold coins of the area as opposed to silver and copper, which were very common, but the gold coins are usually in a better state of preservation because of the fact that they were a storage of wealth as opposed to be a means of commerce. So people didn't use gold coins when they went to the market. They stored their wealth in gold coins. So, so basically, this used to be the gold coinage in Egypt at the time, the Byzantine coins. In the year 20 AH, and you'll hear AH is Anno Hijir, or the years, year or year one is when the Prophet Muhammad migrated, or Hijra is the word in Arabic, from Mecca to Medina. And so that was year one. Year 20, which is equivalent of 626 of current era, or AD, if you will, the Muslims came and conquered Egypt. They came to Egypt, and they took over from the Byzantine. And they started really trying to get rid of the Christian iconography in the coinage by modifying the cross, changing the Christian iconography to make it less Christian, if you will, and more towards Islam. So they started changing the crosses. They used the same molds to make their coinage, and basically they modified the cross, modified the Jesuses, etc., and basically kept changing to make it more Islamic. Then they started adding Arabic legend that were religious in nature. So this is a copper, more not a gold, but you can see that they added an Arabic legend in the top left corner and the reverse, which says Muhammad is the prophet of God, Muhammad Rasulullah, and also in the lower right corner they added no God but Allah, La ilaha illallah. And so they made it Muslim, and then they changed the picture of the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, and made it a more of an Arab-looking person with a sword in his hand, and that is known as the standing Caliph. And they again put Arabic legend along the obverse. They did the same thing for the Islamic, for the Sassanian coins. The Sassanians in Iran also had their coinage. They were more into silver coinage. That was where all the value is. And you can see that the iconography on the reverse shows the fire and the priests that were praying for the fire and worshiping fire. And you see the emperor, the Sassanian emperor image on the obverse. But they started adding Arabic legend. So in the name of God, in the name of Allah, Bismillah is the change they added. And that made it more of a Muslim, if you will, coin. Well, this continued for about 50 years until in the year 77, AH Anno Hijr, or 699 current era or AD, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was the Caliph at the time, came up with a purely Islamic coin. There's some characteristic to the coin that are very important. First, the coin was 4.2 grams, or what's called the misqal, of the highest purity gold. That's the canonical weight that they've settled on for a dinar. And the word dinar came from the Roman denarius and the main denomination. The coins, as you can see, are purely Islamic. They're all written in Arabic, has no really figures or humans images or animal images. Islam really, in its origin, was a fight against worship of idols. And Muhammad is known to have gone into the Kaaba at one time and destroyed all the idols that the tribes in Saudi Arabia at the time were worshiping, and came up with the idea that there is only one God, and he was never born and never gave birth. And basically that's the legend, and has no partner. And so basically these are the legend that are on that coin. So on the left side, which is the obverse, it says Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad. That means God is the one, he is the strongest, he was never born and never gave birth. And then around it, it says when the date the coin was struck. On the other side, it says no God but God. He is alone with no partner. And then there's also additional legends. So all in all, the Umayyad gold coins were mostly minted in Dimishq, which is Damascus today. And that was the seat of the Umayyad Caliphate at the time. there was no gold coins, or for that matter, any other coins struck in Egypt during the Umayyad rule. So that's a very interesting part. Most of the coins were struck in Dimishq and they were distributed. There were some coins struck in Northern Africa and of course in Spain at the time because they were too far from the center of power, Dimishq, so that they can support the commerce. But they really, most of the coins at the time were struck in Damascus and they were distributed throughout the empire. In the year 116, and the easiest thing to think about it in Islam to convert is to add another 600 plus years to the date to convert roughly the AH. But in the year 116, there was another family, the Abbasids, revolted against the Umayyads and took over in the year 750 of current era. And at that time, they changed the capital from Damascus to what's called Medinat al-Salam, or City of Peace, which is current day Baghdad in Iraq. And they expanded the empire. The empire, or the Islamic Empire, was basically spread from about northern Africa. Now, the Umayyads had Spain also, but that remained an Umayyad portion, never changed hands to go to the Abbasid. But the Abbasid went all the way to Kabul initially, and all the way to current day Algeria, Tunis, and of course, Egypt was central. You can see Baghdad is sort of more towards the east, Egypt more towards, more towards the west of Baghdad and below Damascus on this map. And at the time, the distances started becoming an issue, and Egypt had really a central location, and basically the Abbasid felt that they needed to start establishing mints to strike coins because the economy was expanding, and there was a lot of need for money to buy and sell and work the economy basically, and have the species available for commerce. There was another issue, and that is that most of the gold at the time was coming from Western Africa, from the Sahara, from current day Mauritania, southern Algeria, etc. And that gold would be mined, Timbuktu and these kind of areas. That gold would be mined, then transported across the desert to Egypt, then floated up the Nile to Fustat. Fustat is the name of a small town at the time, which was on the outskirts of current day Cairo. Actually, basically today it's a suburb of Cairo, if you will, or a neighborhood of Cairo. But at the time was a small town, and that was it. There was no Cairo at the time, and they brought the gold to Fustat, and then they took it to Baghdad for the caliphate, for the caliph to deal with. At that point, a mint was established in Fustat and was referred to as Misr. And really, in Arabic, Misr is basically the prosperous, the green, the place where there is life, if you will. And that was really Egypt. The Nile and the greenery was different for the Arabs that came from the desert, and Misr was the name given to Egypt at the time. And basically, they established a mint out there and started minting coinage. And with that, the story begins. This is just a quick map to show you where the gold was coming from in the bottom, you can see Timbuktu in Mali, in Mauritania, in Algerian desert. Gold was mined there and transported all the way to Egypt, to the right of the image, and then transported up the Nile to Fustat, or what's today is Cairo, I guess, in general terms. This is an image of Fustat. Was a small town, and basically they had built a couple of mosques. Now, mind you, Egypt at the time was a Christian country and continued to be Christian. And actually, the Egyptian at the time were the Copts, one of the oldest Egyptian, one of the oldest Christian sects, if you will, or before the Catholics and the Protestant and all that. Copts are still a minority in Egypt, but a large minority. And at the time, Egypt was a Christian country. In the year 170 AH, or Harun al-Rashid, who is famous for being the king referred to in the Arabian Nights legends, if you will, started striking the first gold coins in Egypt. So the wealth was in Egypt. There was a lot of commerce in Egypt. Egypt was really the center of the empire or of the Islamic world, and he started striking them. The coins got a little bit different. They were less defined. They had the same things, except that now it talked about Muhammad being the prophet of God, and that there is no God but Allah, and he is alone with no partner. It would reference the date of minting, but it would not say where it was minted, and it would not say the name of the king. On the other side, it would add the name of the governor of Egypt. And this particular coin references the name Ali, which is in the bottom of the obverse on the left. And Ali was the governor of Egypt at the time. And as such, this is how we decide that this coin was struck in Egypt, because there is no indication that it is from Egypt on the coin itself. So the indication comes from Ali, the name Ali, who is the governor of Egypt at the time. The coins were anonymous as to the Caliph's name. So we didn't know who the Caliph was, but the dating is what decided who the Caliph was. No mint name showing on the coinage. Again, no likeness of humans or animals. Basically, again, it's the move against idols and not having idols in Islam. It used decorative Kufic calligraphy. Now, Kufic calligraphy is beautiful, but it's really very decorative, very ornate, but at the same time is very difficult to read for modern Arabs. I mean, I grew up with the language, and I still have some difficulty sometimes deciphering Kufic, because you don't learn Kufic in school, basically. The coins were always hammered. They usually had the name of the governor. There is a couple of coins that don't have the name of the governor of Egypt, but are also assumed to be from Egypt at the time. And they provide the record of all the governors of Egypt and their years of service, because every year the governor will crank out some new coins with his name on it. And so, you know, and when you start seeing the next year a new name on it, you know that the first governor is gone and a new governor took his place. This is one of the rather scarce coins in 171 AH. again, anonymous to Harun al-Rashid, but has the name Musa, the governor of Egypt at that time. And this is one of the more scarce examples of Egyptian coins, gold coins at the time. Here's another governor, Jafar, for 184. So you could see that the history of the governors is aligned with the coins themselves. So we know how long each governor ruled or governed Egypt, and basically when he was taken out, if you will, usually because the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was not happy with him and put another one in his place, and so on and so forth. Harun al-Rashid happened to have two sons. One was al-Amin and the other was al-Ma'mun. Now, al-Amin was the heir apparent. He was the older son, and he was supposed to be the person to become the Caliph after his father died, Harun al-Rashid. He did reign from the year 193 to the year 198, officially, 809 to 813 current era. But for some reason or another, Egypt did not like al-Amin. They preferred al-Ma'mun. So they supported al-Ma'mun, and they gave him power and sent him money and struck coins for him as being the Caliph in the year 196, 2 years before he killed his brother and became the official Caliph. So basically, Egypt played a major role in bringing al-Ma'mun to kill his brother and making him the Caliph in Baghdad, and just rule the Islamic world instead of his brother, who was supposed to continue to rule until he died. And probably his sons would have been the next rulers. But that stopped with the support of Egypt, of al-Ma'mun, against his brother. One of the things, the times of al-Ma'mun were very good. Was a very prosperous time. The times of Harun al-Rashid, al-Amin, al-Ma'mun were very prosperous time. Al-Ma'mun established two things in the coinage of Islamic countries, or in the right of Sika, which means and the right of Qutbah. The right of Sika means that the Caliph's name gets put on the coin. So it is the Caliph's right to have his name on the coinage that is being issued. And it is the Caliph's name to have his the Caliph's right to have his name mentioned in the Friday sermon. In Islam, on Fridays, there is a large prayer in the mosque. It's the only day where you really are asked to go to the mosque to pray with all the other faithful. And there is always a sermon before the prayer. It's the noon prayer, if you will, the late morning, early afternoon prayer, and there is a sermon that gets said and at the time before you do the prayer, and it became the Caliph's right for his name to be mentioned and stressed during that sermon. And those two rights were established by al-Ma'mun. So he established the right of having his name on the coins, and that continued throughout the Islamic era, and also the right for his name to be mentioned in the with respect, of course, in the sermon, the Friday sermon, and that continued. As far as I'm concerned, it's still on. The president's name gets mentioned in Egypt in the prayer probably every Friday. So But he continued to push for not having the mint name mentioned on the coins until about the year 829. This is a gold dinar that was struck in 196 in Egypt. Despite the fact that he was not the Caliph, his name is on the coin, al-Ma'mun. His brother was the Caliph at the time, but again, al-Ma'mun's name was struck on the coins, and only in Egypt at the time. As we progress, al-Mutawakkil started adding his name and the name of the heir apparent on the coins. So now the coins are still at the standard 1 misqal, or 4.25 grams. Now they have the mint, the name of the mint, they have the date, they have the ruler name, and the name of the heir apparent. This is a nice example of al-Mutawakkil. On the left, you can see his name in the bottom of the obverse under the assertion that Muhammad is the prophet of God, and that's his name, al-Mutawakkil ala Allah is the name of the Caliph. He added the mint and date in one of the edge or one of the peripheral legends. So this coin says this dinar was struck in Egypt in the year 293. So it has the mint and the date. And in the bottom of the reverse, it had Abu Abdullah, which is the heir apparent, or his son at the time, who was the heir apparent. So this is new to defining who is the heir, who's coming, who's going, etc. And it's very obvious now that this was struck in Egypt, and it has the year and the name of the ruler. So there is no ambiguity here. As time progressed, like all these big empires, there were a lot of pressures. Economy in Egypt got into trouble. There was a couple of low Nile floods and also some disease breakouts. So that really hurt the economy. The treasury was really weakened. So in the year 240 AH Hijr, was during the Mutawakkil's time, they started allowing the dinar weight to fluctuate. There wasn't enough gold basically coming in to stick to that misqal, the 4.25 grams. So they started allowing the dinar weight to fluctuate, and that became what we call ingot coins. That basically, it was a chunk of gold. The name of the ruler being on the coin was an equivalent to a certification that it is good quality gold. These coins were at the highest possible level. They're anywhere between 22 and 24 karat gold. The highest possible level of purity that also allows it to hold itself and not be too soft. So basically somewhere around 22, 23 karat gold ingots. And basically the idea that it had the name of the Caliph, said this is pure gold, this is good gold, and you can weigh it and do commerce based on the weight as opposed to being based on the number of coins. So if you wanted to buy something that required 2 good coins, which would be 8.5 grams, you could weigh 4 coins to get the 8.5 grams, and that would be the equivalent of the 2 good coins. So that became the norm for a long time, actually, where the weight was allowed to fluctuate. As things got bad in Egypt, there was a governor that was named by the Caliph, Ahmed ibn Tulun, who took over to govern Egypt in 870 current era. He really did go and really worked hard on getting the economy back on track. And he succeeded and started to strengthen the economy, started to put some new ideas into the government, and the country started flourishing, and he began to take over basically from the Caliph and rule as he wishes, and started minting coins in his name. Now here is the importance. Once you mint the coin in your name, you are saying, I have the right of having my name on the coin. I am the ruler, not the Caliph. He did put the Caliph's name that's sitting in Madinat al-Salam in Baghdad on the back, on the reverse, but his name became the standard name on the front. So he took the right of Sika in his hand and became the de facto ruler, and he started striking coins in the year 266, but he always referenced al-Mufawwad ilallah, who's the Caliph in Baghdad, on the back, basically. And he built a new capital, Al-Qatai, again in the outskirts of Fustat. Now, these are all neighborhoods now in Cairo, but at the time they were separate cities, and started a whole bunch of architectural projects. The country got into some level of prosperity. He put some aqueducts and built a very famous mosque in Cairo. He also expanded his rule, if you will, outside of Egypt into Palestine, through Jerusalem, all the way to Aleppo in Syria, and south to basically Nubia, if you will, on the border of current day Sudan. He struck the coins in his name, so his name is on the coin. He did have the name of the Caliph on the reverse, out of some level of respect, and he sent money to the Caliph, but he basically became the de facto ruler of Egypt at the time, and basically allowed his sons after him to rule Egypt. This is his major architectural legacy, if you will. It's a huge, very famous mosque in Egypt that is very well viewed as being pure Egyptian architecture, if you will. He had a son that was really very strong, but who died within a year from taking over. This is one of the most scarce coins of the Tulunid era, if you will, in Egypt, and they're very difficult to come by. But as you can see, the quality of this and the strength of the ruler was really also reflected in the quality and the weights and the number of coins that were struck by him. So it's a very, very indicative of how good the times were. At one point, the Tulunids' rule ended. Harun was the last descendant of Ahmed ibn Tulun. For some reason or another, the Caliph came back with some armies and took over Egypt again and kicked the Tulunid out. the reason the Caliph came to Egypt was to try to stop this Fatimid invasion. There was at the time there was a population of North African and Sicilian Arabs, or Muslims, if you will, not really Arabs, Muslims, but Shia. It's another sect. The Shia are the believers in Ali, the nephew of Muhammad. After the death of Muhammad, there were camps that felt that Ali, his nephew, should be the ruler of Egypt, and all of his descendants after him should be the ruler. And they are the Shia, the followers, if you will, the followers of Ali, Shiite Ali. They're referred to as the Shiite Muslim, while the others are the ones, the Sunni, are the people that believe that what happened after that, the four wise caliphs that came after Muhammad were the right people to rule and establish the Muslim empire. And after that, the Umayyad and the Abbasids ruled. They're all Sunni. The Caliph in Baghdad came to Egypt to stop these Fatimid who were coming from the northern part of the western part of North Africa and Sicily, trying to get to Baghdad to take over the Muslim world. And so he wanted to block them. And he named one of his generals, Muhammad ibn Tugh, as the governor of Egypt. He used the word eLearning, which is prince in Sogdian language in Iran. Now, al-Ikhshid was Persian or Iranian. The Caliphs and the Abbasid regime was mostly from Persia and Iraq, from the western portion of the Arab world today, or the Muslim world, if you will. And so he brought Muhammad ibn Tugh to Egypt and made him the general and the governor of Egypt. And his job was to prevent the move, the Fatimids from taking over Egypt. al-Radi, of course, was the Caliph at the time. And he basically struck what I call the last Abbasid Dinar in Egypt. After that, Egypt never was fully Abbasid or followed the Abbasid. There's a couple of exceptions we'll see later. But at the time, this is the last Abbasid Dinar that was struck in Egypt in 935 by al-Radi, the Caliph. After that, Muhammad ibn Tugh, the Ikhshid, took over and basically took over Egypt. His job was to keep the Fatimids out. He did a good job. He did expand his rule at that point and basically forced the Caliph to grant him the right to rule Egypt for him and his descendants, and basically didn't have to go back or reference the Caliph. He got his name on the coins again and got his name in the prayers, and as such, he was the ruler of Egypt. He did expand Egypt, or his rule. Now, he went way beyond what the Tulunid did. He went all the way into southern Nubia, big part of Sudan, all the way east to Libya, what's current day Libya, took over Palestine and the whole Levant, if you will, practically except for Baghdad. And he went down to Hijaz and took over Mecca. And basically his job was to prevent the Fatimid from attacking. That arrow showing you that the Fatimids kept trying to attack and come in to Egypt. Now, Muhammad ibn Tugh had, he had his name on the coins, his name in the prayer, had a very wise slave, Kafur, in his court, who basically was the tutor for his sons and sort of a very intelligent man that played a very important role during the times of his reign, and basically supported his sons during their rule. After Muhammad ibn Tur's sons died, Kafur basically took over and became the ruler. But because he was a slave, he never put his name on the coin. He put a letter, the Kaf, K, down in the bottom of the obverse to show that he is really the ruler, but he put the name of the last son of Muhammad ibn Tur on the coin. This is basically the last coin that was struck by the Ikhshids in Egypt in the year 355 AH. And it's really attributed to Kafur, not to Ali, the youngest son of al-Ikhshid. So he basically ruled the Egypt for about 3 years, and that was really the beginning of the demise of the military might of Egypt. At that point, as soon as he died, the Fatimid just took over Egypt. They came in, they started again in Western Africa, and their object was to end the Abbasid in Baghdad. They wanted to go through Egypt. That never happened, basically. They just stopped in Egypt and the Levant and Syria and the Hijaz, but they never really succeeded in going all the way to Baghdad. They built Cairo. Now, this was al-Qahira, which means the victor or the vanquisher, the name of the city. There's a very interesting story about this, where they had put bells and wires all around an area to start building the city, the new city, Cairo. And they were waiting. The astrologers had decided that when one star or one planet goes into the orbit of another planet, think it was Mars and so on, that would be an auspicious time to start building the city. So they were waiting for the astronomers to ring the bell. The legend goes that a crow landed on the wires and rang the bell, and they started doing it before even the stars got aligned correctly. So I think it's a funny legend. I don't know how true it is, but that's how the story goes. Anyway, they built Cairo. They built also Al-Azhar Mosque and a university, Al-Azhar University. So this is probably one of the oldest universities. It was built around the year 1000 AD. So it's 1,000 years old university. It's still functioning in Cairo. It still teaches both religion, very strong religious and theological university, but has also science and medicine, etc., as part of the educational programs there. Now, the Fatimid got rid of all the up till now, all these coins looked like the Abbasid coins we've been looking at. Now the Fatimid decided they're going to change all of this. And so in order to make their coins take hold very quickly, they dictated that if you wanted to pay your taxes, the only coins they would accept is their coins, the Fatimid coins. So everybody started either melting the old coins or trying to exchange them for Fatimid coins so that they can pay their taxes. And very quickly, the Fatimid coins took over and all the other coins started disappearing. They ruled from Cairo, Egypt, for over 200 years, and they was one of the most prosperous and great advancement in trades and arts that occurred in Egypt. Crafts, porcelain, textile, glass, it flourished. They built a very strong navy and basically ruled the Mediterranean at the time. And they were basically, you had to go through the Fatimids to get anywhere in the Mediterranean basin. Cairo, some of the historians wrote things about Cairo, like they couldn't believe the gardens in there and the homes in there and the aqueduct and the beautiful architecture, etc. It was known as the Wonder City at the time. It was one of the most cosmopolitan cities you can see or travel to ever. This is some sort of pictures that show you some of the artifacts from that era. This Ur rock crystal was sold in a Sotheby auction about, I guess, maybe 5-6 years ago. I think it realized about $2.5 million at the time. It was just a beauty, Fatimid work. The mosque of al-Hakim, one of the biggest rulers of the Fatimid, shows how detailed the workmanship is, and a carved ivory casket. I mean, it was a very prosperous time. The importance was also that Egypt was the road between East and West. So if you wanted spices from India, you had to go through Egypt to get there and back through Egypt to bring it back. So they did very well from a customs point of view as far as the spice trade goes, and basically it filled their coffers with money beyond imagination. They also managed the Nile very well, and so they had wheat crops that were enormous at the time that they were selling to Europe, and they were basically the wheat basket for Europe. They added a new mint in Alexandria, so Alexandria as a city started prospering again. Alexandria was a prosperous city during the Byzantine times, but the Muslims stayed away from Alexandria for the longest time. Well, the Fatimids started putting Alexandria back on the map and basically started using it as a main port for trading with Europe, and built a mint there to support the trade too. And the Fatimid dinar at the time became the standard of trade in the Mediterranean basin and throughout the world. I mean, they find hordes of Fatimid coins in Sweden, if you will, because that's what they were using at the time. This is really the route to India through Egypt. The boats would come to Alexandria, unload, get onto caravans to the Red Sea, then get on another boat on to the Red Sea to India through the Indian Ocean. So basically, this was the real important part of the financial prosperity of Egypt. They changed the coinage, as you can see here. This is one of the earlier Egyptian Fatimid coins struck in Egypt. There is Fatimid coins that were struck in northern Africa before they invaded Egypt. But once they invaded Egypt, most of their coinage was struck in Egypt. And again, they continued to use the Kufic calligraphy, but they changed to this concentric circles, what's called the bullseye style of coinage. And then, so this is another one, another example of the coins. There were various examples, some busier than others. The striking of these coins took some really quite a bit. The legends on these coins can fill half a page in small type, if you will, in Arabic. This was engraved. These coins are all about 20 to 25 millimeters in diameter, and they have a lot of legend in there and very readable, and very decipherable. So they had artisans that were engraving backwards on steel plates these legends so that they can strike the coins with them, for the Selator to strike those coins or to hammer them. This is how big the Fatimid Empire was at its height. Cairo, Egypt was the capital, the seat, and they had most of Syria, Palestine, Jordan, al-Hijaz, Mecca, Medina, and all of northern Africa, and of course Sicily. This is where they really originated, the Muslims of Sicily, if you will. This is an example of al-Mustansir. Al-Mustansir started ruling Egypt as a young child. He ruled for about 60 years, and it was one of the most stable and prosperous times in Egypt. Everything flourished in Egypt, and his coins are abundant, and they come in some of the best condition you can find. But they were the main money. It's like I think of it as the dollar in the late 20th century, when it was the number one currency in the world. The Fatimid coinage was the number one currency in the world at the time. He also built the mint in Cairo, as opposed to al-Fustat. So up till now, al-Fustat was called Misr, and all these coins would reference Misr as the mint. But they built now a new mint in Cairo, and then coinage started being referred to as minted in Cairo, al-Qahira. And Cairo always took modifiers ahead of the name. So this is a dinar from Amer, who came after al-Mustansir. And basically, this coin references Cairo as al-Mu'azziyya, which means the respected. And, you know, this is probably one of the first coins that reference Cairo. I know there is another coin a year earlier that references Cairo as the city, as the mint, but this is one of the very early coins that reference Cairo. Now, in 400 AH, 1100 and the late 400s and early 500s AH, the 1000, 1100, there was a period where it was not obvious who is the heir for the throne, and the ministers or the grand viziers or ministers had all the influence, and they basically were trying to choose who's going to rule and who's not going to rule. At the same time, the Europeans were landing in Palestine and occupying there under the Crusades, and basically distracting the people that were ruling in Egypt, the Fatimid. Remember, this area was part of the Fatimid Empire, and the Crusades were really wreaking havoc and distracting them by landing with their military and armies and taking over. Also, the Crusades, despite the Pope telling them not to do that, started issuing facsimiles of the gold dinar, because that was the standard of trade in the whole Mediterranean, the whole world, or the known world at the time. They started issuing facsimiles of it, basically to also be able to participate in the commerce, but also cause problems to the Fatimid Empire. These dinars that the Crusaders were issuing were lower weight, debased gold. They were not the 22, 23 karat gold coins. And basically, the coinage of the Fatimid started being compromised because people weren't sure which coins they were using. And as such, it really lowered the importance of the coinage of the Fatimids. That's when more of the Venetian coins started popping up in the Mediterranean. This is a Crusade imitation Fatimid dinar that supposedly was struck by al-Mustansir. Although it looks like it's written in Arabic, it's gibberish. You can't read it. There is nothing to read there. It just looks like it is, but you can't read and make out what it says. It just looks like it. So, and this is another one that was an imitation of Amer, supposedly minted in Misr. Again, you can't read it, and it really doesn't make any sense, but that caused some problems, mostly economical problems for the Fatimid. At the same time, because there came that point where the viziers ruled the country, the grand minister, if you will, vizier, because they didn't want to put al-Amer sons in the rule. So they started striking coins that referenced the expected or expecting God's order as the ruler. So there was nobody there to rule but the ministers, if you will, but they were issuing coins that talked about al-Muntazir li amrillah, which means the person who is expecting God's order. These are relatively rare coins, and it was a short period of time, but it was a very important period of time because that was the beginning of the demise, if you will, of the Fatimid Empire. The Fatimid Empire started really getting weak, and the Crusaders started attacking Egypt. So basically, the Zangids of Mosul, there was a small empire, military empire in Mosul, the southern portion of Iraq, were called upon by the Fatimid to come and help them. So the Fatimids, the Zangids sent an army led by General Salah ad-Din ibn Ayyub, or Saladin, to stop the Crusaders from coming in. And so Salah ad-Din did stop the Crusaders and became the vassal for the Zangid king. He started striking dinars in the name of his overlord, Muhammad ibn Zangi. Again, these are fairly rare coinage at the time. It was still using the Fatimid coinage, but Salah ad-Din took over little by little. And when Muhammad ibn Zangi died, Salah ad-Din basically established himself as the Sultan of Egypt, started striking coins in his own name and get his name into the sermon for the prayer. So he basically availed himself of the rite of Sika and khutbah. He kept the same designs for the gold dinars as the Fatimid dinars, and this is the first dinar that Salah ad-Din struck in Alexandria in the name of his overlord Muhammad ibn Zangi. So this is really usually categorized as a Zangid coin, but really it was struck in Egypt and Alexandria by Salah ad-Din in support of his overlord Muhammad ibn Zangi. This is the first dinar that Salah ad-Din struck in his own name, Alexandria Mint, 589 AH. Again, you can see that it is very much like the Fatimid. At that point, the country, at that point, the country was becoming more and more Muslim, and the Christians became more and more of a minority. It was still not fully Muslim, but he maintained the coinage of the Fatimid, and he reestablished the Sunni faith as opposed to the Shia faith that the Fatimid had put in Egypt. Basically, Salah ad-Din's biggest accomplishment was the defeating the Crusaders in Palestine and liberating Jerusalem. He did a whole bunch of treaties with the Crusaders, so that brought some peace into Egypt. Built a citadel. One of the biggest architectural feats that he accomplished is built a citadel to defend Cairo from potential invasions by the Crusader. His descendants afterwards were really not able to maintain the peace with the Crusaders, and really economically they started getting problems because, again, remember that the commerce was little, and the Crusaders were pressuring the economy very much. So it was difficult, and basically the one big thing that came out of the Ayyubi times is that Egypt became the responsible party for making the Kiswa for the Kaaba. The Kaaba is a building, a stone building, and it's covered with this black silky material that gives it the image that we are familiar with, and that is really a cover. It's a kiswa, and Egypt was the country responsible for producing this cover and sending it to Mecca every year for the pilgrimage, for the Hajj, and basically remained to do that until 1927. When Saudi Arabia took over that responsibility. But at that time, that became the biggest job or contribution, if you will, to Islam that Egypt did at the time. This is Salah ad-Din Cairo Citadel. It's a huge building. It's very impressive. It butts against a mountain, a rocky hill, if you will. So it's really a very important accomplishment for him. This is an image of the Kaaba during the Hajj, and the Kiswa is that black with gold lettering all around it that Egypt used to make until 1927. So one big thing that happened during the Ayyubid was in the time of Al-Kamil Muhammad, one of the descendants of Salah ad-Din. He changed the calligraphy. He now started using the day-to-day calligraphy, which is called Naskhi calligraphy, to replace the Kufic, so that people can read these coins. Most of these coins, if you don't know Kufic, and most people didn't know Kufic, could not be read by people who don't know Kufic. So the Naskhi is the calligraphy, the common use calligraphy, and Kamil Muhammad introduced it into the coinage, and that's how it has been ever since. So in the year 1628, 25, he introduced it. This is a coin from 1628, shows the difference now. This is very, very easy to read for the common people. So an Egyptian today can read this very easily without having to refer to a book to find out how it reads. the Ayyubids had soldiers in their military that were from Turkey and from southern Russia, if you will, and they were called Mamluk. Mamluk in Arabic means owned. So being owned, a person that is owned is a Mamluk. So somebody owns a Mamluk, okay? So they were really slaves. They were children that they bought from Turkey or Circassia, and they trained them to be warriors, and they really were trained to be fearless warriors. And they started being generals and really started to gain status in Egypt during the Ayyubid reign. There were two types of Mamluks, or two categories, or two styles. There were what they called the Burji, or those who are from the tower, and their barracks were at the citadel, and the Bahari, or the Nile, or the sea dwellers, and their barracks were in a Nile, and Manial in the Nile, a small island in the Nile. And they were two categories. Some the Burjis were Turks, and the Circassians were the Bahari. They usurped the Ayyubid, and at that point, the first Mamluk royal, if you will, was a woman by the name of Shajarat ad-Durr, who was married to the last Ayyubid Sultan. And when he died, she took over as the ruler of Egypt under the banner of the Ayyubid. But the Caliph in Baghdad basically sent messages to Egypt and was very displeased because he was saying, what is this? You guys don't have men? You let a woman rule the country? Even at those times, well, like on any other time. So basically what she did is married another Mamluk, Aibak, and then they brought in a small prince as sort of figurehead to become the official ruler. So Shajarat ad-Durr and Aibak became the actual rulers of Egypt, and that prince, Al-Ashraf Musa, was basically the puppet king. They started issuing coin. Now, Shajarat ad-Durr issued a coin in her name, very, very rare. I've never seen one. There's one in a museum in Cairo, and that's it. And then when she married Aibak, and they put Ashraf Musa, there were coin issued in the name of Ashraf Musa, and until he was removed eventually, and Aibak became the official ruler. They disposed of Shajarat ad-Durr, and Aibak started striking coins in his own name. The Mamluk maintained the same coin design as the Ayyubid, the late Ayyubid, and used Naskhi calligraphy. The biggest accomplishment in my mind that the Mamluk did was to stop the Crusader invasion of Egypt, and defeated the Mongols in Ain Jalut. At the time, Hulagu, the Mongol king at the time, was moving west and had burned Baghdad, had taken over all of the Persia, Iraq, Syria, and was moving towards Europe, towards Egypt and towards Europe. And the Mamluk stopped them dead in their tracks at the time. And I say that this probably was the most important accomplishment, because if they had lost, the Mongols would have gone through Europe and burnt the whole place down, and history would have been a lot different than what it is today. one of the rulers of Egypt, Mamluk rulers, was Baybars, and he was so strong and powerful. He went and got one of the descendants of the Caliphs and brought him to Cairo and basically made him the official Caliph. So they had a Caliph that is legitimate from the Abbasid dynasty, but of course he was a puppet Caliph. There were coins struck in his name, and they are fairly uncommon, if you will, and scarce. This is really an image of what a Mamluk may have looked like. They were very well armed. They were warriors by training, and they were fearless, if you will. An interesting thing about this is the Mamluks' descendants in Egypt are still around, or were still around, and they sort of have names that are a little different than the normal Egyptian people names, and they're considered to be sort of a class by itself, and possibly an upper class of sorts. This was true until probably the late 50s, early 60s. After that, that disappeared completely. But they were there till the late 50s and early 60s as classier people, awlad al-nas, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The thing about the Mamluks is they were all had inner fighting all the time. They were killing each other. It's defined by a few of the kings having a very prosperous rule and large wealth accumulating in the state coffer, but most of them were very short rules, always got killed, you know, and it was happening all the time. And so one of my main interests is in the Mamluk period, and there are rulers that lasted for 2 months. So they barely struck a few coins and then they disappeared and somebody else took over. So some of these rulers, their coins are extremely rare and very difficult to obtain, and more expensive than most, okay? They wielded quite a bit of power, even during the Ottoman rule of Egypt. I mean, we'll talk about that. That their power in general was really stopped when Muhammad Ali in the early 1800s basically invited all the main characters of the Mamluks to the citadel for a dinner, and then killed them all. And it's known as Mazbahat al-Ala, or basically the massacre of the citadel, because he knew he could not rule Egypt without getting rid of them in general terms. This is al-Ashraf Musa coin. That's the puppet king from the Ayyubid that was managed by Shagarat al-Dur and Izz-ad-Din Aybak. The coin behind my head is a Izz-ad-Din Aybak coin. That's the first truly Mamluk coin. Shagarat al-Dur is the first truly Mamluk coin, but I don't have it, and I don't have a picture of it. But Izz-ad-Din Aybak was her husband. They became strong. They're the major power in the Mediterranean basin at the time. Qutuz was the ruler that defeated the Mongols, and basically, I contend, saved Europe from them. Baybars reestablished the Abbasid Caliphate in Egypt and shows his power by using a heraldic lion on his coins. Now, this is the first time you get an image on a coin, and the Zahir Baybars basically used it, and I'll show you a coin here in a moment. They built palaces, mosques, watering fountains for the poor. I mean, I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, And you could go into the neighborhoods, in the old neighborhoods, and you would see these watering fountains that are 1,000-year-old, still dripping water so that anybody who's thirsty can go drink. They had aqueduct, big palaces. They were big philanthropists, and they actually established a whole ministry, Wazarat al-Awqaf, ministry of philanthropy. So the government was the biggest philanthropist in Egypt, basically, at the time. Egypt became the most powerful country under them in the Mediterranean, in the world, if you will. Cairo was the most important cosmopolitan city. People that wanted to make a fortune went to Cairo. There were all kinds of people in Egypt, from Europe, from the Middle East, from the Far East. They all came seeking their fortune in Egypt and Cairo. The art trades industry at their best during the times of the Mamluk, and they expanded the empire and their wealth. This is the heraldic lion coin by Zahar Beybars, first coin now that has an image of an animal besides the writing, the decorative calligraphy. So this is really a very nice, interesting coin, and it's a first, if you will, of its type. They took the title the servants of the two august sanctuaries, basically Mecca and Jerusalem. They owned both places. They had conquered Mecca and they had conquered Jerusalem, and they basically served those august sanctuaries. They built palaces, and they were known as the ruling class, and were known as Awlad al-Nas, which is loosely translated as the children of the select. And that term, when I was growing up, till the 50s and early 60s, was used to describe people that had a little bit more power and a little bit money. And it's a remnant of the Mamluk times. They weren't necessarily people that were referred to as children of the select. As I was growing up, were not necessarily descendant from the Mamluks, but they were the people that had a little power and money. They continued to control the commercial roads between Europe and the Far East. That was the main source of revenue for Egypt for the longest time. Fatimid, the Ayyubid, and now the Mamluk. They made fortunes of the Europeans trying to go to India and back. Basically, this is where the Mamluk Empire was in 1517. It went all the way into Turkey, with Damascus, Syria, and Palestine part, and al-Hijaz, Mecca, and Medina, and Egypt, as well as parts of Libya, were part of that empire. They built mosques. Some of the most impressive mosques that were built in Cairo are built by the Mamluks. Again, very Egyptian, if you will, architecture, very ornate, very large, impressive mosques that are still standing in Cairo. In 801, the difficult economic times set in. There were monetary problems because the world had what they called the Great Boyan Famine. Apparently, the world didn't have enough gold and silver to make specie to meet the demand of the prospering economy in Europe. And so the whole world basically plunged into a monetary chaos. This was solved once they went into South America and started digging all that silver and gold from South America. But at that time, it was a problem. and there wasn't enough species to support the economy, and so everything plunged into economic turmoil. At that time, Sheikh ended the Alexandrian Mint and then focused on the Cairo Mint or Misr for the coinage. The Venetians started striking these ducats, and at that point they became the standard. Al-Ashraf Barsabai, who was the king or the ruler, the Mamluk king in Egypt, basically tried to do a monetary reform and created new coinage called the Ashrafi, after his name, of course. And it's a gold dinar that's based on the Venetian ducat, same kind of weight, same size, and because the Venetian ducat was the standard, he was trying to become the standard again. But in 902, Cape of Good Hope was discovered, and the commerce to India started going around Africa instead of going through Egypt. And all of a sudden, the Egyptian customs income dropped dramatically, and that was the beginning of the end of the Mamluk power, if you will. This is the Ashrafi, the first coin that was minted in Al-Qahira to basically challenge the ducat. It still has the name of God, and it still has, but it shows the mint, the date, and the name of the ruler, Abu Nasr Barsibay. It shows the Al-Qahira or the Cairo on top and the date on the bottom, 35. Of course, 8 is off flan, but it's 835 Anno Hijri. Now, the Ottomans were expanding and the Mamluk were in their twilight, so the Ottoman decided to invade Egypt. But since the religion at the time dictated that Muslims are not supposed to fight Muslims, the Ottoman took the fact that the Egyptian coins had the name of God on them as being sacrilegious, that you shouldn't have the name of God on your coins, and decided to invade Egypt to make that not happen. Selim I invaded Egypt 1923 and basically took over. He did retain the Mamluk as the ruling class. They were running the ministries. They were the administrators, if you will. What the Ottomans at the time did was take all the skilled labor, all the artisans, all the poets, all the writers, anybody who had culture and anything to add out of Egypt back to Turkey to build their so-called civilization. Remember, the Ottomans were goat herders in the mountains of Anatolia, and they really did not have quite a bit of civilization, if you will. And by taking a lot of the Egyptian knowledge and moving it to Iraq, they basically stripped Egypt of a lot of the strength, and Egypt really fell into a dark period. Now, new coinage was issued without God's name on the coin, because that was the reason the Ottoman claimed that they came to Egypt. This is how big the Ottoman Empire at its height was. All of Southern Europe, Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, parts of Russia, Iraq, the Levant, Hejaz and Saudi Arabia, all of Northern Africa. I mean, the Ottomans took over for a long time, and they were rulers for a long time. This is the first Ottoman gold coin that was struck in Egypt by Selim I in 1923. This is a beautiful Ottoman coin that was struck in Egypt by Suleiman I, the lawgiver. Suleiman al-Qanuni was his nickname, if you will, the lawgiver. He wrote new laws for the Ottoman Empire, and it's a very nice looking coin. It's fairly common, but it's always comes in very nice grade. Low education, great poverty. There was big separation. The Mamluks and the select were on top of the heap with all the money, etc. And basically, the rest of the country was thrown into poverty. They had a bunch of bureaucrats that were siphoning out all the wealth and sending it to Turkey. There were several attempts of revolts, but they were always squelched very quickly and very effectively. This is a coin that was struck by Ali Bey, who tried to revolt against the Ottomans in AH 1183 or 1769 current era. But you can see the coin is all Ottoman with Mustafa's name on it, and the only indication that it was by Ali is the first letter of his name in the corner, top left corner of the obverse. So it was a failure. I think it lasted for 2 years, and then they took over, and that was that. In 1805, Muhammad Ali, who was a soldier of Albanian descent, became the vassal in Egypt under the Ottoman. And after the retreat of Napoleon's army from Egypt. So he became the vassal under the Ottoman rule. And basically, he took over. He had enough gumption to take over, and the Ottoman Empire at the time was in beginning its slide and weakness, and so he started taking over. Muhammad Ali is considered the founder of modern Egypt. He built dams on the Nile. He built roads. He built all sorts of mosques and basically reformed the military, the economy, the culture, and basically Egypt went into an Enlightenment era, but he continued to use Ottoman coinage instead of striking his own coinage. And he had a son, Ibrahim, who was a military genius, and basically he took his army and headed to the Ottoman Empire. He was at the edge of the Ottoman capital. And at that point, the Ottomans raised the flag and said, hey, okay, you can hold on to Egypt, to Muhammad Ali, you can hold on to Egypt and you can have it for you and your descendants after you, and we're not going to interfere, but go away, don't take over the capital, Istanbul, if you will. So that's fine. Ibrahim retreated, came back to Egypt. Muhammad Ali ruled till 1848, and then Ibrahim took over, but died within 6 months, and his brother Abbas I started ruling Egypt. This is the coinage that was used during Muhammad Ali's rule, 1840 AD, but it's Ottoman coinage. It looks exactly like all the Ottoman coinage, except it was used with and it was for the Ottoman Caliph, if you will, Abdul Majid, with his name on the coin. Muhammad Ali never had his name on coinage, so he never claimed the right of Sika and Qutba. In about, the French built the Suez Canal, great achievement and that's another big story. And that ended in 1869. Egypt had a quite a bit of the stock of the Suez Canal Company at the time, and basically at one point Egypt got into such debt to the British Empire, to the British banks, because of the lavish lifestyle of its caliphs. I mean, these guys, the rulers, descendant of Muhammad Ali, were so spoiled. One of them, when in the opening of the Suez Canal, basically put very expensive carpeting from Cairo to Suez so that the Empress of France can ride on carpets throughout the desert and spend all that money. It was just ridiculous. And basically what the British, the banks in England got was the shares, Egyptian shares, the shares of the Suez Canal Company that Egypt owned. At that point, the British felt that they needed to protect their interest, that the canal was too important, the Suez Canal was too important to leave unprotected, and that they needed to basically come into Egypt, invade, and protect their interests, to protect the Suez Canal. And they basically came in 1882, didn't leave till 1956, basically. The British basically were the effective rulers of Egypt, but they continued to use the descendants of Muhammad Ali as administrative rulers. So you got the king of Egypt was really an administrator for the British rulers. They continued to use Ottoman coinage as the official legal tender. So this is a coin from 1888 after the British invaded. Again, this is an Ottoman style coin. Abdul Hamid II is the named ruler or Caliph on the coin. And so even though it was effectively ruled by the British, they still used the coinage of the Ottoman Empire. In 1916, World War I, the Ottoman Empire started falling apart, and it became apparent. So the British took one of Muhammad Ali's descendants, Hussein Kamel, and named him the Sultan of Egypt, and struck the first Egyptian now gold coin in his name. But these were struck in England at the Eton Mint in Birmingham. So they all have a mint mark of H, if they have a mint mark. They were struck in England. This is the £1, if you will, or the 100 piastre in the name of Hussein Kamel, minted at the Eton Mint in Birmingham. This is 1916. It has the name of the Sultan in there, so he got the right of Sika and probably the right of Khutbah. He was mentioned in the prayer. Now, as time progressed, human likeness got on the coin, starting with Fuad I. Egypt became a secular state with strong European influence, mostly British. In 1952, a revolt or coup by the military, and a republic was started, and the last king, which was Farouk I, was deposed, and he went to Italy, lived in Italy at the Via Veneto, and gold coins basically became a collector's item, and they weren't really for circulation anymore, but they still commemorate the rulers and major events. So, and they were mostly for the collecting market. So you can see this is 100 piastre from 1922, Fuad I, first coin with human image now in Egypt. And 1938, the commemorating King Farouk's wedding. He was deposed in 1952, gold £1. And this is a Republic coinage to commemorate the death of Gamal Abdel Nasser, the first president, if you will, of Egypt. And here's a coin commemorating the peace treaty with Israel that was signed by Anwar Sadat with Menachem Begin and Jimmy Carter overlooking the activity, if you will. Again, this is a commemorative coin, And this is basically my story. These coins, gold coins, are now for basically the collector's market. They're issued in very small quantities. People like them, but at that point, this is where my collection stops. After that, it's of no value. I like coins that have seen some circulation, if you will. And with that, I'm gonna ask Logan to tell me if there is any questions or any thoughts.
It looks like we only have one question right now, and that is, was that gold from West Africa bought? And if yes, by what means? And how was it paid for?
I'm sorry, I can't hear it very well.
Oh, it says, was the gold from West Africa bought? And if yes, by what means? And how was it paid for?
I honestly don't know. I'm assuming these people mining the gold. There was a very, very good article published by the numismatist, actually, the ANA magazine. I guess about 10 years ago, that was written about that whole concept of mining the gold in Western Africa. And I don't remember how the gold was transferred, but I'm assuming that the gold came from West Africa to Egypt to buy food. I mean, remember, Egypt was the agricultural piece along the Nile. It was desert. From the Nile all the way to the Atlantic Ocean was desert. So if you wanted to buy cows, if you will, or wheat or whatever, you had to go to Egypt to buy it, and you probably paid in gold at the time and took that back, and the gold was there. But that's a speculation. I can't remember what that article said at the time. I'm going to dig it out, and if I find out, I'd be more than happy to give a better response to that.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions we had. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. I know that I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did as well. Like I said before, some of the emails that went out for the future webinars, a lot of you didn't get. We're going to try to resend those. And if you don't get them, please email me at lcurtis@money.org, and I will be happy to get those links to you before the next webinars. But I hope you all have a great day, and thank you so much again, Gamal.
Thank you.